let's look at a modern Golden Age classic, Tom Scioli's WitchMan. Hey comic fans, welcome to Dangerous Comics. I'm your host, Dane Georges, and today we're looking at Tom Scioli's WitchMan. Oh man, I am so excited to talk about this. This was a Kickstarter that Tom Scioli did very recently. I literally just got this book, could not wait to take a look at it, and just dove right in, read it in one sitting, and I loved it, and I can't wait to talk about it with y'all. And I'm sure you guys are very familiar with Tom Scioli. If you're not, he did a lot with Cartoonist Kayfabe and then went on to make his own YouTube channel, Total Recall Show. If you haven't checked that out, Total Recall Show is an amazing resource. Big inspiration for me doing this channel as well. But Tom's review of Jack Kirby's work is something you should not be missing. You need it in your life. Check it out. But Tom also makes amazing comics. You've probably heard of a lot of his work. He's really well known for Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, along with his other biography of Stan Lee, I Am Stan. He also did Jack Kirby's Star Warriors, starring Adam Starr in the Solar Legion, which was an adaptation of a really old Jack Kirby, like one of his first strips, and he updated it, kind of remastered it for us. Also did The Myth of 8 Opus, Fantastic Four Grand Design, Godland. The list goes on, and you can't go wrong checking out a Tom Scioli comic. All the things I've just listed are things I want to talk about on the channel because they are amazing. Tom has also talked about a lot of them on his channel, so if you want to hear it straight from him, what he was thinking and everything, check out Total Recall Show. I'll have all of that linked in the description below. But diving into WitchMan, WitchMan is a really cool experimentation for Tom. Just to dive into the back a little bit, I don't want us to look at this totally yet, but there's a really cool little biography down here that says Tom Scioli is the author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, and I Am Stan, a graphic biography of the legendary Stan Lee. After working on 2 back-to-back biographies of famous comic creators, Tom saw how much fun they were having inventing new superheroes and racked his brain to come up with one of his own, WitchMan, a superhero for the ages, a new classic. And there's all Tom's contact info. And I do think that is really what Tom is doing here. Tom is kind of channeling Golden Age comics into a modern age. And I think Tom's style works so well for that. I love this illustration. They're so dynamic. There's a lot of Batman here while also combining a lot of Jack Kirby. Because I think there's a lot of Etrigan the Demon and Clarion the Witch Boy in here in WitchMan. But there's a lot of Golden Age Batman, and even kind of getting into a little bit later with a little bit how Joker would be drawn with these kind of big teeth, but really cool, just invention of a new superhero. And I think it kind of goes into what I've heard Tom talk a lot about of why Marvel Comics was successful, and I guess how you could even say why Batman is so successful. It's because these are horror superheroes. Batman is a horror superhero. He's a vampire superhero or Dracula superhero. And a lot of the Marvel comics were superheroes that were also horror based, coming from freak accidents or Spider-Man being having such kind of a scary costume, or Hulk being an actual monster. So I think there's a lot of connective tissue there, and I think that kind of connects with how Tom sees superheroes and maybe why those ideas work so well and what he wanted to explore. He's exploring superhero as horror and kind of the roots of that. And so we get really cool introduction here. I love this, and it really does feel like this is kind of the piece of Jack Kirby here, where he's inventing so many characters, just throwing them in here, throwing them on the page, and seeing what sticks. And I think it all sticks. I want to see all these characters more. I was reading this and I just wanted to draw all these characters, and I think that is the sign of a great comic, right? I was inspired after reading this comic. I literally read this comic today and I was I gotta talk about this on the channel. But got the WitchMan copyright. Tom's P.O. box is down here if you want to contact him, as well as the his Instagram and all that stuff we saw earlier. But we got all these great characters. I love these bad guys that are like, we got a Dracula, V for like vampire, Frankenstein, Gilly is like the creature from the Black Lagoon, Dusty is the mummy, and then we've got these like plain Joes, which are all these Painter Joe, Nurse Joe, Baker Joe, Sailor Joe. So good. But all these characters kind of come into the story later, but give us a great intro to them right away. And obviously from the start, we're getting some Batman in here. And I think we're getting like a little bit of like Gotham as New Salem, which is an amazing name for like a town and a way to really lean into like awesome, cool Gothic architecture. Like very much like kind of like Tim Burton's view of Gotham in the 1989 Batman movie. So we get WitchMan by Tom Scioli, the true story of the creepiest super character of the decade. I love it. It's a true story. And it is probably a great creepy super character. Like, has there been a lot of other good ones? I guess last one maybe would have been like Spawn back in the 90s. Like, this could be the next Spawn, guys. So check this out. And I guess I should also say, this was a Kickstarter book, but I have seen, and so I don't know if this is like currently available on Tom's website or anything like that, but I know I've seen Tom say that once all these are going to be shipped out to backers, that he's going to post some of these online for sale. I don't know if he's going to work these to maybe go to comic shops as well, but hang tight. You guys need this comic. You're going to want it in your collection after we take a look at this. But right off the bat, we get a very iconic look at WitchMan, and this is a reference to this view of Batman. And this view is coming from Detective Comics 34, but it's probably better known for its view in the very first issue of Batman. But the very first issue of Batman kind of repurposed some of this origin story that first appeared in Detective Comics 33, along with that image from Detective Comics 34. It kind of just like they replaced this blimp image with Batman, this Batman image, but otherwise it's the same. And these blimps and all this stuff comes up later in the Witchman story, so I think this is kind of like a blueprint for what Tom was wanting to do with Witchman. It feels very much like an homage to it. But we get this kind of like view of New Salem. We don't get the rest of kind of like that origin of Batman, but I do want to just point out, I think that there's another piece of like the Batman mythos here. I think Tom did something really kind of genius here of like combining two of maybe DC's most iconic characters of Batman and then combining this Joker, like kind of like a later Joker interpretation, probably drawn by like Bill Finger or Jerry Robinson with this kind of style. But it kind of got a little bit more cartoony as it went, and I just think there's something going on here of the connective tissue of like how Joker's teeth would be drawn as these gigantic, almost like tombstones, and how Tom is then also using that for his interpretation of Witchman and the mask that Witchman wears. So I think that's really smart. Like Joker is almost, I think you could argue Joker's like as iconic as Batman. So to combine those two into one is a really, that's a power move. That's a great idea. That's like, can't believe it hasn't been done yet. We get this amazing view of the ominous witch tower, and this is not the full moon scene. This is the crescent moon scene. It's even more witch focused and kind of like that time of spookiness, of Halloween, of all that. It's all kind of packed in here. But we get like the ominous thing. He's leaving the witch tower, going out. He sees omens of ill fortune. It's time for action. So he doesn't have the bat phone. He's got his giant bubbling cauldron that he's mixing and seeing ill fortunes, and he's going to go out and fight the bad guys. This reminds me of a Jack Kirby panel of reminds me of two Jack Kirby things. It reminds me of a panel of the Silver Surfer flying toward the camera, but it also reminds me of the Black Racer. So I think there's a little bit of both those guys mixed into this formula with Witchman as well. And then we get, I think, just an amazing contrast, even like New Salem being so dark, gritty. And then this young girl and her dog, what's her name? Waverly Grant. And I also think, so we later learned that Wallace Mitchell is WitchMan, and I think that's really smart. His name is basically, it's WM for WitchMan, Wallace Mitchell, and she's Waverly Grant, like Wizards of Waverly Place. I don't know if that's where he's going with it. But she's running toward the camera. I love just the contrast of like these styles too, where like her coloring is like such a pop, and then everything else is so dark, but she's running and this car of goons is coming toward her. And this is obviously like also a reference to how Batman's Batmobile used to be drawn, like with the big bat on it. It even has like the fin, like his car would be drawn. And I do think that this is like where Tom is also combining his love of like Frank Miller in here. Like this seems like a Carrie Kelly kind of stand-in. I love this, the 3-panel, like the 2 static. There's a little bit of different with the color here, and then the third as they're surprised because all of a sudden they're being picked off the ground and flipped around by WitchMan with his wand and dumped out of the car, and they fall down off the bridge. I love this kind of like architecture and kind of like gothic look that Tom is leaning into. But they catch him and he sends him off to jail. I love just like the simplicity of the jail. It's got like the scales, and then we see the bars. It's all you need. Great cartooning. And then the commissioner saying, well, the Chiller Gang. Nice work, WitchMan. And that's such a great name for the gang. Like, I want to draw the Chiller Gang versus WitchMan now. They are so fun. It's such a fun design group. We get WitchMan's origin here. It's kind of similar to Batman, but it takes a really great like deviation to like the kind of classic like lost your parents kind of origin, because it doesn't happen totally in that order. I do like the way that Tom is telling this story too. It's kind of conversational. It says, "You might be wondering how I got started. Well, since you asked nicely, it was a dark and stormy night. I took shelter in an old house. I was in over my head. I saw things in that house that I'll never tell another living soul. When I woke up outside the house, I was clutching a book. I kept it under my bed and never looked at it until the day my father died. Something about his death didn't add up." And so this is just like, I love this. This is like, you get so much story that's not even like being shown on the page, but just happening in your imagination in these panels. I saw things in that house I'll never tell another soul. It's evocative. It makes you're imagining it out. Like, what do you see? What supernatural things were in this like haunted house that he saw? And then we get this kind of like extra layer that I haven't really seen in a hero origin, where like he then uses this book, and where it kind of maybe gets a little bit more into like the Etrigan territory or supernatural son of Satan kind of stuff. But using the techniques described in the book, I was able to bring my father back from the other side. Dad? The shambling mockery of my father told me he was murdered by a sheriff's deputy who was obsessed with my mother. In a moment of fearful dread, I sent my father's apparition away. What have I done? Did I condemn my father to the holy hell of the archdemon Beelzebubler? Or maybe my father's revenant still roams the earth. Who knows? Bringing my father's killer to justice was my first mission as WitchMan. Now I use these unholy powers from hell to do good here on earth. That is awesome. I love this idea of like, it's not even like, Spider-Man was responsible for his uncle's death. It's like his father died, and then he's responsible for like bringing his father back from the dead and like doing this like unholy thing to his soul, and then being responsible for that. Like, that is amazing. And then how he like sent it away in fear and didn't like maybe close the loop properly. Maybe his father's still out there. And then just all this, we get so much in like 2 pages of comics, and that is like a Jack Kirby method right there, right? Like, Jack could tell more in 2 pages than like any modern story tells in like 6 issues. And I think that this does it too. Like, that's a great origin. I'm so in. I want Tom to do more issues. I hope this is not all he's doing, because I think there is a lot of fun to be had with this character. We then get this like ominous setup. This is also like that's a classic Batman pose from his first like telling of the origin, just kind of like how he's like hunched over. We see he's like holding the broomstick. It's just really great how we're using that that visual language of like Batman here. And I love this 2-panel page. It's also, I think you can tell, if I haven't mentioned it yet, but Tom has done a really great coloring job here where he's like actually not, like I think this is actually printed on white paper, but he's coloring it as like a paper texture, kind of making it try to look like an older comic. And there's only a few instances where he actually lets the pure white of like the actual page come through. Otherwise, it's all this kind of like yellowy paper texture. And I think it really kind of makes this feel even more like a Golden Age comic. And I think there's also like, I've heard Tom talk about it, but there's like color that he's using in the actual line art. Like this isn't actually like pure K black. This is like a little like red brown, and I think that makes it feel even more like an old Golden Age comic. So he goes in, he's gonna have to stop this big boss guy who's causing like havoc throughout the city because he caught the Chiller Gang. And we have like a really great like kind of like Batman scene as he's like jumping and they're shooting at him, oh no, blasting away. And then this is actually a Michael Golden homage to a cover that he did of Batman like flying down this staircase with his cape draping behind him. And it's even like the cover is all green, so really cool homage there, and it works so well with WitchMan. But there's something kind of like even more disturbing than like Batman's silent demeanor. WitchMan has this like just like grimace, this like smile, this never stopping smile that he's confronting all the enemies with, that I think is even like a cooler kind of twist. And I think that's why it's like cool to combine that like Joker with Batman kind of thing, and how we get like an even more like disturbing kind of looking character. And even like a little Spider-Man here uses his wand to web them up, but he lost the bad guy. We then he saves this reporter, who I think is also like kind of like a Frank Miller-esque kind of character, even how he kind of draws the glasses and everything. Kind of reminds me of like the adult like police commissioner Barbara Gordon, or how Carrie Kelly might look if she was grown up. But he does a really cool thing with his wand and transports the plane somewhere else. We then now get like a little bit more, of like a Golden Age Superman aspect brought into this, as like WitchMan has this relationship with the journalist, kind of like how Superman has a relationship with Lois Lane. And we get that kind of like iconic from like Superman 1, the first Superman movie, where he goes to the rooftop to have the interview with Lois. She has this interview with WitchMan and kind of tells her about how his powers works. And why do you dress up like a witch? Is it cosplay? Are you a super fan? He says, no, I never liked witches. They always terrified me. Kind of like how Batman was afraid of bats and kind of stuff. But so how does your powers work? It's magic. There's like a little bit like of a sexual tension here. Is like, you can hold my wand if you want. And then they're like holding it together. He shows her how it works and they almost kiss. She takes off the mask, but right before he leaves, he actually has to go stop this blimp attack, which I think really resembles that blimp that we were looking at in that Batman Detective Comics issue. Blimp that they're showing here actually does have like the fins on it too, kind of like how these guys have fins. So he flies off. Amazing colors here. I love like the scene of like make it pure red for the background. He uses his wand to poke the blimp. I love that it's got like a creepy face on it as it's crashing. This is like one of my favorite panels of the whole thing, this upshot of WitchMan and those teeth. They're just amazing in the mask. So he also now comes up against these other goons that they're all white. They're called the Average Joes. So they all have Joe names. We saw them on the front. But they kind of take him down. WitchMan jumps out of the blimp. This is a really great sequence, and I love all the tall panels. And I like how this is even like 2 panels in here. So it's like he's falling. We get this view of him, and then another view from his POV. He's like trying to grab stuff, and he can't. His broom does slow him down, but he breaks it, and he lands in the dumpster. He's gone, and she gets kidnapped for the bad guy to try to find him. And this is what I was talking about, the one moment where Tom, he's so reserved everywhere else, but this is the one moment where you actually see the pure white of the page. Everything else has been colored, but this is like the actual color of the page, and he uses it to kind of like really like make this moment stand out. And it's where the Grim Reaper is about to end WitchMan, but he stops the blade. He comes back to life, like he fights off death. And he gets dumped at the dump, and when he kind of comes to, he sees the shambling corpse of his father that he had brought back from the dead. So maybe his father is still on this plane, maybe he's imagining it, but his father tells him, "My killer's still out there, you have unfinished business." And he gets up. And this reminds me of Ditko, kind of like the scene of like Spider-Man struggling with the equipment on him, and he throws it off, and he has that triumphant moment of getting up. This also reminds me of The Dark Knight Returns, where Batman is fighting the mutants in the mud pit and he gets up. And so I feel like that is a homage to maybe both or one of those scenes. More great like panel layouts. I've never seen like a really long panel like that and then all these guys in there. I think that's really cool. But he comes after the boss. He's going to save his girl. He gets shot. Really great sequence as he's climbing the stairs. He's chasing after the big boss, and we get this awesome kind of like DeLuca effect of WitchMan coming up after him, but he's so wounded. We then cut to outside, and he's hanging. He's like trying to get up to him still, but the boss is shooting at him. This kind of reminds me of like a Golden Age Batman sequence, like Batman and Robin definitely would fight on girders against mob bosses like this. This is an amazing panel of like just getting riddled with like the bullets. Of course, it's like a Tommy gun. It's very like gangster-esque. Shoots all these bullet holes in him, but before the killing blow, he's able to knock him off. They got the final showdown. He's like, "Come on, do it already. I don't need your pity." And this guy kind of reminds me of maybe like a Vandal Savage. I love his like claws and like how he's got the sharp toenails too. But he's kind of like a demonic kind of bad guy too that also is working with magic. So good like foil for WitchMan. But WitchMan's not going to let him die, not going to let him off that easy. And we actually get, another just straight up Batman reference here with a reference to Detective Comics 27 cover here as he's bringing in the goon. He's bringing to these are like detectives basically. He's bringing Big Boss over and he's going to throw him on the rooftop. But we get kind of a one-to-one homage there as well. We kind of like wrap it up. Goes back to his lady, finally reveals who he truly is. He's Wallace, and they're going to live together. He's going to wrap up being WitchMan, and he burns the costume. And now we get kind of even more of the Carrie Kelly kind of connection of the girl that he originally saved is now going to maybe become Witch Girl. Kind of like how Carrie Kelly became the new Robin to kind of like carry on the mantle and keep it going. And more, can write some letters to Tom, let him know what you think of this, letting us know, this is like the newest addition, a long line of legendary super characters' first appearances. Welcome to WitchMan's world. We're all just living in it. And we get an awesome view of the Rogues Gallery, which these are great. Like, I need to see some adventures with these guys. Creepy Crawler, Spooky Cat, the Bat, the Cauldron. That's amazing. It's just like a bunch of cauldrons stacked. Mr. October, he feels like a Scooby-Doo villain, but like he would like change his face plate out to be like a jack-o'-lantern or a vampire. Witchman of the West, so good. And these three were suggestions by Matt, who is Tom's co-host on Total Recall show. So really cool. I love that collaboration. And we get a great like epilogue of Wallace needing to put the costume back together because there's been a reappearance of this bad guy. And amazing. Oh my God, this just blew my mind when I first saw it. But he goes up against this guy. This bad guy is amazingly designed. He's so kind of spooky. Love like he's like all like muscly, spiky. And we get a to be continued, da 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 da. And then it's turned and now it's to be continued now. And then we get this face off. And it turns out that this is like the guy that his dad was warning him against. This is the resurgence of his mother's killer. He's got an upside down deputy star because he's like a demonic demon deputy, and he ends up taking him down. He's like, "I did it, Dad. You can rest now." So amazing. I really hope that's not the end of WitchMan, because this has been an amazing first issue. Or if it is contained, man, I'm glad we got it. I, for one, want to make some WitchMan fan comics after reading this. So I hope this has piqued your interest. I hope when Tom post this as an available comic after the Kickstarter, and I hope everyone that got the Kickstarter is just loving this comic as much as I am. But I hope when he makes it available, you'll all jump on it and grab this issue for your own collection, because because you cannot go wrong, and this is a classic Tom Scioli comic. And if you want to support my work, I am also a working cartoonist. I've got a series that I do and self-publish called Doomskull, which is about an ex-supervillain that works in the grocery store with his minion Bag Boy. Another, maybe not superhero for this era, but a supervillain for the era. And I think him and Witchman, maybe they would get along. Maybe they would be a good foil for each other. But I got Doomskull. I also do some horror zines like Sleepless Sights or The Passenger, which is about, the perils of picking up a hitchhiker, and it might not be a normal hitchhiker, might be a little supernatural as well. I've got Jigglybub, which is about a piece of gum that God spits out, and he lands on Earth. And I've got X-Ray, which is a collection of my 4-panel webcomics that I would post on Webtoons, Tapastic, and the like. So I would love if you would check out my work. You can find it at danegeorges.com. I've also got that linked in the description below. But this has been Dangerous Comics. And please remember to think and read dangerously. And I'll see you guys next time.